somewhere experienced at least one cybersecurity breach, which is pretty crazy.
I was selling into MNCs in New York. We often tell our clients we operate as your banker, your lawyer, your board member, but we're licensed to do none of that.
Yeah, right. How do you sell transformation to industries that have built their entire identity around never changing?
The Tatas ran Tata Group. Now they brought somebody else in, eventually because there was no Tata to run it.
Innovation isn't the enemy of preservation, it's actually the key to it.
Are you really sure this is what your future should look like? He just wanted his grandkids to own his legacy.
We are building, right? Eventually, when we get old, we always think that, okay, we're doing this for our children to then eventually run or, and get hold of it. But yeah, when we get old, then it's for our Web3 listeners would be that you're not going to suggest their altcoins to to them, to family offices to invest in. You've invested in 60 plus startups, right? That's a lot.
5 years, yes.
Wow. So let's talk a bit about your VC firm, Tacenda Capital.
Elon Musk, right? He's not a rocket scientist.
Yes.
He's not a engineer in making automobiles.
Right.
But he's shaken up two different markets, right? Because as an outsider, he's able to see things and not fall into the trap that others have fallen. Any AI can give you tons of data, but it's the trust and the wisdom and the experience that lets us make those right calls in the interest of our clients.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another session of Chinet, where we learn from builders before the machines take over. I'm your host, Rachit Magan, and today we're diving into one of the most challenging puzzles in the business world. How do you sell transformation to industries that have built their entire identity around never changing? Meet Alban, a strategic architect who has cracked the code on something most consultants fail at. While people struggle to even get a single meeting with family offices, Alban has become a trusted advisor to high net worth individuals and family offices managing generational wealth. As a senior partner at Gallant and Toole and a general partner at Tacenda Capital, he's built a reputation as the person ultra wealthy families call when they need to evolve without losing their legacy. His journey is anything but conventional. He started by organizing high-profile events from things like Rahul Dravid's farewell to Microsoft's high-tech events. Then he transitioned to learning psychology and neuroscience, of managing powerful personalities and shareholder dynamics. From there, he built a 200,000 person community in Bangalore. Innovation isn't the enemy of preservation; it's actually the key to it. Alban, welcome to Chinet. Please tell us a bit about your path from event management to advising families with generational wealth, because that's not really a very traditional career evolution which we see.
Absolutely, Raja. Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, my journey into investing and advising was accidental. I kind of stumbled my way into it, like, all crazy stuff that happens in life. So when I started off in events, because I did an MBA in event management, right? And I got some incredible projects. Like you said, I got to do some farewell for sports legends. Rahul Dravid is an amazing person, and when you meet him in person, and doing it for him was like a great highlight of my career at that time. And then I did Microsoft Tech Ed. I did a lot of these events, even did a movie launch, right? Exciting stuff. But then it also had some crazy working hours. I mean, there were days I would never turn up at home. So I think maybe I should specialize in something. And I kind of somehow found a job that sold telco collaboration tools, and that actually gave me my first exposure to global markets, right? I mean, I was just this kid from Bangalore, and suddenly I was now selling not just to MNCs in India, I was selling into MNCs in New York and in UK and whatnot, right? And it
Right.
really lit me up, and I found out something about myself, that I love working in niche industries where no one's heard of the industry. I remember the first time I walked into one of my big tech sales, and I showed this is telemedicine when India still didn't have 3G connections fully dominant in the country, right? And I was talking
Right.
about telemedicine, and some of these IT managers' minds were blown. Like, this tech is now available in India. I'm like, yeah, it's available. You could be the first to start using it, right? And then and I guess I'm blessed and cursed with a restless spirit. So when a friend introduced me to the startup that was getting launched in neuroscience, I said, "Oh, it's radical. Let me jump into it." And
Right.
I ended up learning so much, like you said, on neuroplasticity, on decision making science, and it changes the way you understand people behavior, especially, you know, critical thinkers like founders and investors. And that's where I discovered investors and founders have very unique personality overlap. They love to try experimental tools that is built
Right.
for performance and growth. They don't care it's mainstream. They only care if it works. And then when you're selling to these people, you have to sell to the community, right? So I end up talking to people. I used to sell through all the co-working spaces in Bangalore,
Right.
go do an event for them and then sell through that. And
Right.
then
And this was which year for context?
so this was in 2015 when I started doing this, 2015,
Wow. 10
2016.
years back. Right.
Exactly. And at that time, Meetup was such a dominant platform, right?
Yes.
We didn't have a lot of the tools that we had today. And suddenly it is all about WhatsApp groups and IM groups and whatnot.
Yes.
And suddenly I ended up working with these different communities. And I was working one of my, I think Arjun was one of the guys I worked with. And he was like, "Hey, Albert, I'm trying to build this great community and let's work with together." And I was then suddenly consulting with startups, not just on the services we were selling them on neuroscience, but on everything from, "Hey, you're a sales guy, you're a marketing guy, what do I do?" And then a few years later, when I started my own consulting firm, I had this huge customer base of startups looking to grow and scale up. And then one day I started getting calls from family offices, right? We used to call them private investors in Bangalore, at least, because home office
Right.
is a very North American concept. And
Right.
these guys said, "Okay, now I see you all over the place. You're talking to all these startups. Do you have any recommendations for me?" Right? These were like, people in my dad's age group, and they would be like coming to me for advice. And I realized that some of them were just looking to put money in good places. Some of them were looking for cool technology. And then suddenly I was raising capital for startups from a few lakhs to multiples of crores, right? And it kind of really felt like I was guiding wealth into innovation. So when I came to Canada about 5 years ago, it seemed like the logical evolution of what I had done before, right? Not a
Right.
change, but rather, okay, let me advise families, let me advise startups the right way with a structure and a process.
Right. Yeah. So that's very interesting. But like, how did you actually end up pivoting? To from events to wealth management and managing. What does it actually? What did event management actually teach you, which helped you in the pivot?
Oh, that's a very nice question. A lot of people don't realize this, but events
Hmm.
is, even though you spend months and days planning towards an event, it's the last few days before it where you need to be 150% involved, right? You're dealing with egos of multiple players, you're dealing with logistics, security, you're dealing with the weather disrupting. It's like a domino effect, right? Let's say you're doing an event in Goa, a traffic jam in Bangalore, somebody misses the flight,
Right.
right? So it's actually a large, you need to look at the macro and the micro thing. And wealth management is also very similar. A lot of people assume that wealth management is an accountant's game ground or a lawyer's, playground, but it's actually understanding all the different moving pieces, understanding how the strings are connected to each other, and understanding how to deal with complexity without panic, how to make people comfortable when you are getting them to change into something that they are not comfortable with, right? Change is never easy, and when it's intentional, it can be still painful. And managing a lot of these complexities is what I think. And the funny thing is, till you actually asked me that question, I didn't even realize, but it's like how Steve Jobs says, right? You do connect the dots only looking backward.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because yeah, I think because ultimately it's high stakeholders and you whom you need to coordinate with and whom you need to actually end up make sure that they are attended to in the manner which they're expected to, right?
Absolutely. A lot of people who have built wealth
Right.
because they're people who are an expert in that domain, or people who are
Right.
used to making very decisive decision making. which
Right.
means 90% of the time they're correct, right? That's why they're successful. So
Yeah.
you have to deal with those kind of personality types. At the same time, you got to deal with the very bureaucratic system of lawyers, bankers, investment funds, and so forth. And then finding that balance, I think, is where we really operate. We often tell our clients we operate as your banker, your lawyer, your board member, but we're licensed to do none of that.
Yeah, right. That's very interesting. But let's talk about family offices in general, right? Or even in India, like what we say, private investors.
Mhm.
There's a research, right, which you've done, which actually shows that 74% of these family offices have somewhere experienced at least one cybersecurity breach, which is pretty crazy. But also, when you think of it, how they operate, or even how these older companies operate, right? They're very resistant to technical change and generally technical adoption. But if they've actually experienced these cybersecurity breaches, right, how do you explain this paradox that they're actually having these breaches, but still they're very resistant to change?
So the way you got to understand is context, right? The paradox is because home offices, family offices all believe in having control, right? They are not move their wealth to a wealth management firm. They are managing their own money. So they prefer to manage everything A to Z. They have their own ecosystem. But also, it's a generational gap, right? People who started managing this managed it on maybe Outlook. Maybe they managed it on
Right.
Microsoft, right? And they've used the same password for 45 different accounts. And
Right.
the guy running their tech is usually like the person who did my dad's for my dad's office, the tech guy, is some guy he knew for 20 years, right?
Hmm.
He's not a
Maybe he's
cybersecurity
probably
expert.
like a guy who was the first one to install a PC in his place, and then
Exactly.
now he's only doing everything else.
And these guys are battle tested. Don't get me wrong; they have their
Yes,
expertise,
of course.
but they're not cybersecurity experts, right? They don't live and breathe cybersecurity. So what happens is when you first have that breach, you make one or two assumptions. Oh, I used the wrong password, or I probably kept the door unlocked, right? Something like that kind of analogy. So they don't usually look at that as a systematic problem, but some of them, if they have younger kids who've taken courses that have exposed them to all of this, then they tend to be the driving force, and that helps. But a lot of
Right.
times, it's still the dad's money, the grandfather's money. So you have to find that balance in getting them to see this is not a change. This is just an upgrade. Like you bought a Maruti when you were younger, now you're just buying a BMW.
Right. But as you said, right, this is these family offices are either grandfather's money or father's money, or a lot of it is actually built around preserving wealth, right?
Yes.
And a lot of it is built around not changing and staying in a status quo. So how do you convince someone that the very thing that made them successful might be their biggest threat?
So that's actually very important to understand is you don't want to go in and frame it as saying you're wrong or you're missing the train, right? You got
Right.
to frame it, what got you here won't get you there, right? A lot of change happens is because they are not familiar with the new markets, they're not familiar with the new technologies. I still remember someone telling me, oh, if I'm globally going to invest, can I just go to the Cayman Islands, right? And I'm like, yeah, but they don't really exist anymore the way you think they exist, right? So we kind of work with them to understand what is their idea of the future. Like wealth preservation is a term, but what does that mean for each family is unique. For some people it could be holding on to the family brand, right? Like for example, for years the Tatas ran Tata Group. Now they brought somebody else in eventually because there was no Tata to run it. For
Right.
some, it could be simply giving opportunities for the next generation to go do whatever they want. If they want to
Right.
go run a film industry, go run it. If they want to go ski in Portugal, it's right. So understanding that is the real key. Understanding what their family wants, what their vision is, and then working around that. Sometimes this also means asking some very tough questions, and saying, "Are you really sure this is what your future should look like?"
Right. That's so. Tell us about some uncomfortable conversation or a question which you've asked, which has been, when you look back, it's it's something which is very difficult or funny, or give us an
I think
anecdote.
it's kind of interesting experience that I had. One of the earliest clients we worked with, they were so they're a multi uh, jurisdictional family, which means that some part of their wealth is in different parts of the world, right?
Right.
The patriarch or the grandfather who started the business did a great manufacturing business in Pune. Business did well. The son took over the business, but the grandfather still runs the larger long-term decision making because day-to-day operation, the long-term needs two different heads, right? But all the grandkids are based in North America. There's no children living in India who can take over the wealth, right?
Oh,
But the grandfather is like, oh, my grandkids are going to fly down and they're going to live in India and they're going to live in Pune in the same house that I built 35 years
mm,
ago for the whole family. It's got
mm,
12 bedrooms. I'm like, I said,
that's
when
not
is the
good.
last time you visited you? I said, when is
Yeah.
the last time your family was here for a long period for you to own this, right? And one of the grandsons one introduced me to the family, so he was on the call with us, and I said, "You built amazing empire, and kudos to it. You've gone through multiple market changes. You've gone through every tariff, every licensing raj, everything you've dealt with. But your grandkids are living in a digital world. They don't understand your language, right? Now,
Mm,
if your empire doesn't evolve to your grandkids thing, it becomes a junk in the attic.
right.
Are you willing to accept that as a legacy? And he wasn't very happy. But finally, after a few more conversations, he came back and he said, all right, what can I do so that my grandkids still run my company? And
Mm,
finally, it boiled down to he didn't want a manager to run the firm. He just wanted his grandkids to own his legacy,
mm,
even if they were not living in the same country or city. He like let them
right.
be the owners. I don't want to sell my business because it's his love letter to the world, right?
Of course. That's deep, and when you think of it, whatever we are building, right, eventually, when we get old, it we always think that, okay, we're doing this for our children to to then eventually run, or and get hold of it. But yeah, when we get old, and it's unless and until they're actually in India, and or wherever you are, if they're there, only then they would eventually run that, right? Otherwise it's all
Absolutely.
uh,
And there's this interest in competencies and skills, right? Like I remember the
of course.
story. Uh, Azim Premji's son, I think, joined the firm from London, and
Right. Good pro.
Economics Time had said, "Hey, can you send us a photo because the prince has joined the father's empire?" And the company responded, "No, no, he's joined as a junior person. He still hasn't earned the right to get a PR support for the company, right?" So
Right.
when his son finally took over running the entire company, he had built and grown within the firm. But that does not mean all children will do that with their father's business, right?
Of course, of course. And a lot of children also, it's both ways. Like there is like the Azim Premji case, and then there's also the case where there are a lot of non-competent second or third generation entrepreneurs, which then take heel, and then eventually, the business either fall down, and then they're sold differently. But yeah, but I think that's a topic for some other day. Let's
Absolutely.
yeah, let's talk a bit about about how you handle cross-border complexities, because with like you explained, and even like in a lot of cases, um, these are very risk averse clients, right?
Yes.
Like like you said, like a grandfather, and they have grandchildren all around the world. But you describe yourself like a monocational engine, seeking emerging domains and an unconventional edge. What does that mean in practice?
So first thing is I avoid chasing hype, right? I look when I
Right.
talk to a client, I look for what I call a structural blind spot that others overlook because
Right.
it looks very niche, it looks very early market, it looks too complex, right? It's common tendency for us to ignore all of those things. So I look at places what others don't do. Now, when you're dealing with risk averse clients, especially in legacy wealth or conservative markets, you
Right.
can't go and say this is new, this is shiny. You have to look at the asymmetric advantage. Something that might seem very obscure and small and not even geographically connected to the large picture, and say this is a pivot point, this is a leverage point, right?
Right.
This is going to change the playing field, and you need to be the first guy. And interestingly, however conservative somebody is, they always look for what's the next advantage. And a
Hmm.
lot of them, if you look at it, have made their money by being the first person in the new market, or
Yes. Of course.
leveraging that first relationship, right? And this is what we do. We look at those regulatory gaps that no one's looked at. We look at asset classes no one's worked with, and we look at insignificant, what others call as insignificant market trends, and we bring them to clients based on their interests. So we don't have, unfortunately, a catalog of things you offer everybody. We do it very, very bespoke. We do it very,
Hmm.
very unique to each person's requirement.
Right. Of course, this is. I think this is as it is a very bespoke industry to be in,
Yes.
and yeah, and I think a TLDR for our Web3 listeners would be that you're not going to suggest their altcoins to to them, to family office to invest in. So I'm sorry, guys, if you're if you're a Web3 project owner, Alvin, Alvin is not going to help you over there. But
But the funny
maybe
thing
to
with Web
yes,
three, I find like it is so nascent. While
yes,
I wouldn't recommend people buy products of it, I would tell people to invest in its infrastructure,
yes, of course,
because the building blocks of that is is the building blocks of what in the internet is going to look for in the next 5-10 years.
one
And
hundred
so it's
percent.
like I don't know if you heard of this analogy. You don't go looking for gold. You be the guy, you sell pick access to the gold diggers, because that's where you never run out of business.
Hmm. Right. That's deep. That's very deep. Great. So let's talk a bit about about wealth transfer. Now, there's been a research that there are over $100 trillion is being transferred from older generation to younger generations, right? In the next 5 to 8 years.
Mhm.
So how are you positioning traditional wealth managers for this generational handoff? When it's already very hard to maintain relationships with the Gen Z clients.
I think you got to understand that the reason it gets difficult is because a lot of traditional wealth managers, the old school guys, kind of look at the next generation as a future problem, because their relationship is with the patriarchs or the current
Right.
generation of decision makers. We kind of found uh, the best way to do it is look at them as present clients, because
Hmm.
ultimately they have their own wants and desires. And like you said, third generation is always when it gets tricky, right? So we kind of try to understand what is that they want, and we help reframe their role, right? Not
Right.
just as asset collectors or allocators, but we kind of become the governors of continuity. We work with them to build the future steps, right? Because end of the day, uh, your future clients, if you don't sell them today, tomorrow somebody else is going to get them, and you're going to lose the relationship. So we look at them as, okay, what do you want tomorrow that we can help you build today?
Hmm. That's that. I think that's very logical, and yeah, I think that's the way to go. Um, and you've invested in 60 plus startups, right? That's
Yes, in the
that's
last
a lot.
5 years. Yes.
Wow, wow, that's that's a lot. So let's talk a bit about your VC firm, Tacenda Capital. So there's a lot of VC firms have niches, right? And like we talk with firms which invest in crypto, which invest in certain specific AI wrappers. You specifically target immigrant and underrepresented founders. So how being an outsider actually becomes an advantage, or why do you target this specific niche?
Okay, so it started partly because when I first came here, I was an immigrant myself.
Yes.
So it kind of was like people I was talking to in India saying, hey, how's the market there and so forth, right? Uh,
Right.
and remember two parts of the process. One, I was doing this before I came to Canada. So I was writing or helping people write checks for smaller checks into early stage startups. So when I kind of started with Tacenda about half a decade ago, it was basically a evolution of the informality that I was doing, right? So we now had a thesis, we had a structure, we had standard term sheets, all of that stuff. It just seemed like a natural evolution. And why do we support early stage startups and why do we support a lot of them is because one, the smart decision with start investing is to invest in as many as you can in different industries as you can so that your risk profile is lower. And for every startup we invest in, we have turned away almost 20 to 30 of them. So we actually go very early, look at niche industries. Like one of the coolest things that I invested over the years is underwater drones that operate in Canada's cold weather. We've
Wow.
we've invested in this medtech company that does dissolvable micro needles, which can release medicine over a delayed time period. So when you
Oh,
have these
wow.
cool technologies, you want to go early and you want to support them. And sometimes it's the immigrant entrepreneur who's looking to change the market scape. It's the
Hmm.
guy who is an outsider looking at the industry and saying, I can do this differently and better.
That's true. That's I think even in this is a very it's not the best example, but when we in yoga, they tell you that while you're meditating,
Mhm.
think that you're looking from above, right? You're not looking from inside, you're looking from above, looking at yourself from above. And that lesson kind of also navigates to business, that whenever you're in a situation, try to try to get out of your body and look from outside, and then as a third person view, try to see that what's happening inside, and that gives you better results. So I think that's like a
Oh,
similar
it is.
pattern.
It is. Matter of fact, I learned about this concept from Henry Ford.
Hmm.
Uh, like he's a pioneer of American automobiles, right? So the way
Yes.
he built his industry was every time he worked with people who are experts in the domain, they would tell him, "Oh no, this is not how it's happening. You can't do this." So you would hire people who are competent but outsiders to the industry and say, "Go do this." So the way we today make plate glass industrially was by built by people who had never stepped foot in a glass factory.
Wow. Right. Yeah, yeah. There are a lot of anecdote. There are a lot of things which actually come from outsiders, and someone even like there are instances where non-specialists have actually ended up getting a better solution than someone who's done 10 years of research. Of course, it's not always the fact, but yeah, there have been some good
Absolutely. I mean, take Elon Musk, right?
yes, of
He's not a
course.
rocket scientist. He's
Yes.
not a engineer with in making automobiles, but
Right.
he's shaken up two different markets, right? Because as an outsider, he's able to see things and not fall into the trap that others have fallen into.
Yes, yes, of course. And let's talk a bit about your community building experience. You've mentioned building a massive community in Bangalore, which is 200,000 people from grassroots. So how does that experience actually end up helping you cracking exclusive wealth management circles?
So first of all, I can't take full credit for it. I didn't do everything and all the things.
Mhm.
I did work with a team of people, right? And we
Right.
all had this common goal, not of building a large community. We were trying to do right by the few people we knew, and we wanted to help them through a critical growth phase, right? So some of us were technology guys, some of us were marketing guys, some of us were guys who were looking at it from an outsider's perspective and said, okay, we should do this differently. And
Right.
Bangalore has an advantage. It is the startup capital of India, which meant
Of course.
we were spoiled for choice when it comes to number of people, right? I mean, there's a place in HSR, literally they say you throw a stone, you hit 20 entrepreneurs.
Yes, of course. That's Bangalore is always you get a
Exactly.
lot of entrepreneurs there. Yes.
And we realized you don't have to sell anything to make a community great. You just need to bring value. You need to bring connection, and the momentum builds from there, right? And then it's a compound interest. Trust brings more people in. More people means better quality of skills coming to the ecosystem, and that itself balloons the community. A lot of times we were not building anything, but we were nurturing the community, growing organically, like a farmer, right? Prune the unwanted parts, nourish the parts that are working well.
Right. Yeah.
And that translates to wealth management too, because you need to find the right place to put in capital and take things out of places which are not helping the long bigger picture.
That's true. Uh, let's move into a bit, of let's start looking into the future now. We've dig down your past and try to understand everything and how you've reached here, and it's honestly amazing. Your journey is very inspirational for all the people who are right now in the grassroots, either building communities. We have a lot of community managers and community leads in the Web3 space, of course, right? Because there's a lot of human connection. Everything, like, we have, basically, there are no businesses in Web3. There are mostly communities, right? And there are
Yes.
leaders who are right now working on that. um, so that's it's very inspirational for them, and that's why I want to ask a few questions on how you look at the future, and especially with AI. And that's basically the core topic which we usually discuss in China, that how AI would change industries. And wealth management is something which we've not really discussed till now. So, looking at wealth management through an AI lens, what traditional functions do you think will completely disappear, and how are you preparing for them, those?
I think once upon a time, the wealth management was successful because they were the gatekeepers to knowledge, right,
Right.
and information. Today, AI has completely eroded that barrier. So the question of knowledge and information is relevant. You go to ChatGPT, it'll tell you recommendations of what's currently tricking in the
Yes.
market, what's going to happen next 6 months, and the
Right.
predictions are almost close enough that you can figure out.
Right. And you switch on deep research, and you're basically you have, yeah.
You have what we used to call as research teams now are jobless because ChatGPT does that job for us, right?
Yes, of course.
So what I tell people is you need to now look at the next set of skills that's important, right? What are these skills? One is the ability, the wisdom to know what is the right signal in the right time for
Right.
that particular client or for your own personal journey, right? Having that level of discernment in knowing which is the right thing. Second, diplomacy, because end of the day, AI can tell you data and information. It can't get stakeholders in a room. It can set up the calendar invites, but it can't
Right.
get all the stakeholders to be aligned on a logic that matters to them, right? It's a balancing act. So you need to have diplomatic skills. You need to have the ability to charm people into agreeing with you. The last thing, of course, is the narrative building, because like I said, everybody is has their own personal journey, personal goals. So you need to be able to find a common future that people can commit to and build towards, right? AI can tell you what is possible. It can tell you what can happen based on numbers, data, and be very good at predicting it. But end of the day, it's us humans who decide what is desirable for us, what makes us tick, and what we want to build. And then we're the ones who make it happen.
Right. So I think the last leg still needs to be, there still needs to be humans, but a lot of the initial things can now be done by AI, like research and
Absolutely.
like all the data collection and all of that.
Exactly. Like I said, data is plentiful. I think it takes human intuition and wisdom to put it together. Right. Today, you go to any platform and they will tell you what's the uh, 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 risk and reward on a trade.
Right.
But you need to make that decision based on all other factors that are important to you.
Correct, correct. And I think it also, there's also a lot of trust, right? Like, in the sense that there is there is all that data which is being given by ChatGPT.
Hmm.
Now, if I trust you to make that decision for me, then I will always trust you. I'll not go ahead and trust ChatGPT
Right.
or even someone else, right? Then it just becomes like, whom do you trust to make those decisions for you?
And that's where our role comes into it, right? We are
Right.
trusted partners, whether it's managing wealth, whether it's managing legacy or estate. We kind of try to work with what the client or the family wants long term. Like you rightly said, any AI can give you tons of data, but it's the trust and the wisdom and the experience that lets us make those right calls in the interest of our clients.
Correct. So, data is, I agree that, there is a lot of data which can now be given by AI. There are a lot of other tertiary things which from wealth management, for example, your optimization, portfolio analysis. So, all of these things are already there, but still, then if all of that is being done and it's just the end decision, then how does a wealth manager actually justify their fees now with all the AI tools available?
Actually, the funny thing is these AI tools have been there for almost a better part of a decade. If you look at large hedge funds, they've been
Mm-hmm.
building their own algorithms and their own large language models for years. Uh, Today, it's retail accessible. Now, the best part of this is that you have data and information that's available for everybody, but also the worst part is you have too much data and information. So our expertise come in making those narrative pathways that benefit each user unique to them. Like AI cannot listen to your entire family history and realize that what you're not telling me is that you want your family to still own the company, right? It'll
Right.
only tell you, oh, you should sell the company because you've told it that, but it
Mm,
never looks beyond the
mm.
information. It never looks at the human element.
Right. Right.
End
That's
of the day, you're making money for humans, right? So, I mean, if you don't have a human understanding that person, then you're never going to get great returns. You're not going to be able to look at the potential in an idea. A classic example is when a startup was like Starbucks, right? It took 240 plus tries before someone funded them. And who thought
wow.
Starbucks would be what it is today, right? AI
Right.
will look at the same project and say this is a bad idea. Nobody's going to drink coffee and spend $50 in a crowded room.
Of
But
course.
the world actually still is growing with Starbucks.
Yes, yes. Now I think it's become the de facto co-working space in Bangalore. Whenever
Exactly.
anyone needs to work, they go to Starbucks. If they don't have a co-working space, yeah.
And
Uh,
exactly, but AI can't see that potential because
yes.
as much as it's got information humans, it does not have information on human desires.
Hmm. True. That's true. So, Steve Jobs said, move fast and break things. And you say work quietly with intent, right? So, are you going against Steve Jobs? Like, explain that. How does that help you? And, what is that?
This kind of means okay. So when Steve Jobs says move fast and break things, I don't think he said break things loudly, right?
Hmm.
His message is very valid, and we still tell this to all our founders. We tell them, I don't care if you have a crappy MVP that goes to market. If you're
Yes.
embarrassed with your MVP 3 months after you launch it because it's bad, it's normal, it's expected, and it is not in the worst thing under the world, right? But what we tell them work quietly with intent is focus on building and creating. You don't have to get on to the bad habit of saying, oh, we built today 30,000 lines of code, right?
Right.
Just get your results to the market. Focus on the big picture. Don't fall into the trap of where you want to do performative work, do impactful work. That's where our
Mhm.
usual goal comes. And also, our industry is wealth management, right? We don't really, we can't really put a list of all our clients on any of our list because it's confidential information. So,
Yes.
our business is always keep things quiet, keep things under the radar, make sure you give great returns. I mean, we don't advise on what to invest in, but we create the pathways for them to make the best investments
Hmm.
within the tax structures that they operate under, right? So we have to work quietly and we have to work with intent to make sure that our clients are succeeding in whatever financial decisions that they make.
Right, that's true. And you also work with a lot of advice, in the advisory space, right? So it's not always just investments; it's also a lot of sometimes business decisions, and sometimes, as you said, you need a third eye to you need a third person's view to actually understand something. So tell us
Yes.
about your hardest truth, which you probably told a traditional business leader.
Oh, I think the most common and hardest
Mhm,
decision to
mhm.
information we need to tell a business leader is you should get out of your business that you built for the last 20 years because it's dying.
Mm.
I
Right.
don't know if you remember this, but there used to be this concept known as shorthand that
Mhm.
people who used to be typists, professionally licensed typists, had to learn, right? Like my dad used to
Right. Yeah,
have
yeah.
a book on typist, and this was like I'm talking about decades ago. People actually ran these schools, so you had to be licensed to get a job at these from these schools.
Correct, correct. It was basically, yeah, like you basic like it was like a like a shorter version of text which you can then quickly
Exactly,
type.
right?
Yes, of
and
course.
and that's how people got typists and clerks and whatnot, right?
Right.
Today we have that is an antiquated job. So if our clients are working in an industry that is going to get antiquated, uh, and I can't tell you which all industries are because that's a consultation stuff. Uh,
Right.
but when we see that in the next 2 3 years their business is heading in that direction, if they either don't pivot or they don't exit, then we end up having these tough conversations with them saying, hey, you brought us in to give you the right advice. So our advice is this is where your business and your wealth is heading towards. So we don't tell them sell your business. We say maybe it's time to reinvest that asset into a different type of asset class, right?
Hmm.
And then they make the decision. Some of them choose to sell, some of them choose to uh, pivot their entire company. So it becomes a very personal decision. But it is one of the toughest decisions for us to make because it hits in a lot of people's very core identity.
Hmm. Right. That's. I think that is some value which comes with a lot of human emotion, right? Like you have to
Exactly.
also take a lot of call. Like that's again that's something which AI cannot really do uh, because the human part cannot be understood. Like AI would be like, okay, sell it and you're done, and invest all the money in mutual funds, but it doesn't work that way, right?
True, true. I mean, if you think about it, I actually saw this lovely video a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Someone talked to Grok, and Grok was giving some very empathetic sounding responses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someone said, you've been very empathetic in this conversation. So, how would you score your cell phone having empathy, right? And Grok's response was like, oh, I have no empathy at all. I'm just saying these words because I've been programmed to say this to humans because you guys like an empathetic response, right? So that's what I tell, like, you have the human element is so critical in today's world. The machines can take over some of our automation, they cannot take over our civilization.
Hmm. True, true. I think this is. I'm going to use this. Machines can take over our automation; they cannot take over our civilization. That's very true. But AI is getting like really advanced and really sophisticated,
Yes.
right? With the new
Crazy.
Grok models, and it's growing like crazy. And we don't know in the next 1 year what actually happens to developers. I have we've been we've got a lot of people from Google, from Sprinkler, ex Microsoft, and we've asked this question again and again, that what happens to software development, and everyone has a very different answer.
Mhm.
So I would want to ask that question, the same question to you, that as AI becomes more sophisticated at analyzing industries and recommended changes, what happens to wealth management and transformation consultants like you?
It's very tough to predict what's changing in the next few years because
Hmm.
in once upon a time we could do 5 year market today predictions, then it became 1 year market predictions. Now every quarter things are radically changing. But I think given the current regulatory and current systems in place, decision making I think is going to get a lot faster, which means we as people driving these decisions really need to be able to look at the larger picture,
Right.
a predictive personality, and also needed to make sure that we are right. Now, because the market is changing fast, if decisions are made with, say, at 10 o'clock in the morning, there's a good chance by 2 in the afternoon, somebody in different part of the world has started proposing new regulation to counter a market change that they're not informed of, right? So
Right.
we have to always be ahead of the curve. But AI lets us foresee maybe 2 steps ahead. Once upon a time, we could foresee 5, 10 steps ahead because it took so much time for policy to change. Today,
Right.
policy is changing equally fast because AI is feeding that data into policymakers' line. So I think that's going to be the tough part for us to adapt to policy regulatory changes if we don't keep up with technology. But if we do, then it gives us the edge. It's like the kid who bought the first smartphone in class, right?
Right.
You
Right.
can always Google up the answers.
Yes. Right. Before the teacher knew about smartphones, right?
There you go. See, so that's where we will have to be, right? We will. Uh, a lot of us do in the wealth management space. We don't depend on just retail tech. Like for example, yes, we spoke about ChatGPT, we spoke about Grok, but we also use our own proprietary technology, proprietary models, and that lets us, like for example, we realize while managing so much of our wealth management clients and our companies that they manage, that they were still using the older accounting models that were built when AI, and everyone slapped an AI on their new products and accounting software,
Hmm.
but they're all built as an enhancement, like as a feature set. No one's built accounting from for an AI world. No one's built
Hmm.
accounting for today's ecosystem. So we ended up actually going and building our own product, saying, okay, hey, if you're using our management services and our accounting services, why don't we just build your platform for the accounting needs of tomorrow rather than 30 years ago when the first platforms were launched?
Right, right. Can you tell us a bit about the product?
Absolutely. So we launched about mid July. It's called Numexa. It's a free accounting and bookkeeping services that we're launching. It's launched. It's I don't know if I can send you a link, but it's numexa.galto.com. It's a very simple, easy to use, multi-currency, multi-jurisdiction accounting and bookkeeping software. We kind of realized that we don't want to charge for it because that's not our main business. So we're going to keep it for free, one version of it for any of the smaller businesses who want to use it. Uh, and we think it's going to help a lot of companies, one, streamline their accounting for the end of the year for tax purposes, especially if they're in North America, right? There's a lot of these grants which gives you tax credits for startups, especially like SNRD or Shred or all of that stuff, that people don't get because their bookkeeping was so bad they can't even compile the report for it.
Right.
We kind of built all a Numexa with that in mind. If tomorrow you want to scale up, you want to be able to work in a AI first world, is your tools AI first?
Hmm.
So we
Correct.
went ahead and actually built this with that in mind.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, I've actually put the link on the stream below. If
Thank you so
anyone's
much.
looking at, you guys can check the product out. As Alvin said, it's absolutely free, and yeah, you need AI first products now to in an AI first world. Amazing, Alvin. I have one last question, which is for our people who are now trying to enter the consulting space, or they're already in the consulting space but they want to stay relevant. So because we're talking about AI, so if tomorrow AI does take over most of the analytical or strategic work, and as you said, that I still understand that you would need an architect to for that human element. But then what happens to the 20 more analysts who are supporting the architect right now? How do they stay relevant in the consulting space?
So here's the thing that I tell a lot of people: AI is not going to take away your job. It's going to be someone who knows how to use AI who's going to take away your job.
Hmm.
So the first thing I tell anybody in just entering the job market, not just consultants, is become an expert on all the tools that are coming out as soon as possible, right? You do
Right.
not have to be the gold level expert, but learn to be extremely competent in them. And an analyst is looking at thousands of data streams coming in, right? So AI can make it easy for them to grasp it. But when it comes to making recommendations, finding hidden gems, it's the human intuition. Because remember, all of this data points is a reflection of another human's activity in multiple different industries. So AI can't connect those intuition, emotional decision making factors. A
Right.
case in point I love bringing up is we had this guy in Philippines who was so irritated with the customer care person operating out of India, he canceled his entire export contract out. Right? AI can't beat that.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
And it took another a person to call that guy back and say, okay, listen, I know you're pissed off with that team, but don't worry about it. We're going to analyze this for you. But that little disruption, right, cost another supply chain guy up the line a few $100,000 because he
Hmm.
had to go to somebody else who was charging a high price.
Right.
So any analyst, any consultant coming into the space, understand AI tools so that you know how to work with them, but always keep a human element in place, because you need to understand those emotional triggers are the ones creating all this data.
Amazing, amazing. That's some solid advice, honestly, for our new consultants, or I think even anyone else, who's trying to enter the space. It makes a lot of sense. Great, Alvin. Thank you so much. It's been amazing. We usually, stick to 30 minutes or 40-minute sessions, but we got stretched because the conversation we were having was so intense and so interesting. I hope to all our listeners, that was Alban Jerome, general partner at Tacenda Capital, and a wealth advisor to high net worth uh, individuals and family offices. Once more, Alvin, thank you so much for your time. It has been amazing.
Thank you, Rachit. It was lovely being here on this podcast.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.